يقول الله تعالى في كتابه العزيز بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. My dear respected brothers and sisters, inshallah we continue with the series of a very important topic we've been touching on several times now, the subject of Aqidah and the subject of Iman, which is the translation of the meaning of Aqidah. And we mentioned this several times that the meaning of Aqidah is one thing and Iman is another thing. Just because we have some knowledge of Aqidah, such as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator and the one that gives, it does not necessarily mean that you have the kind of Iman that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala demands and the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam taught his companions. But this knowledge that we have of Aqidah needs to translate or needs to manifest into a condition, into a hal, into tahaqquq. This meaning needs to be present in your behavior, in your consciousness, in your thinking, in your heart, in everything to do with you. So this is the main thing that we'll be focusing on. And just to remind my brothers and sisters, and I said this maybe in the first or second talk that we met, that my duty here isn't to prepare a lecture and come and speak to you about it. My duty, if I was to stand here with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, my duty here is to touch on the essential things and the important things and the priority that we have. And we spoke about many verses in the Quran that clarify for us that the ultimate priority is that we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we follow His teaching and the teaching of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And when we enter our graves, when we enter after death into our graves, everything will be left behind except the condition that we're talking about. The only thing you'll be able to take with you is your deeds, no doubt, and the condition. Because when you're asked by the angels, who is your Lord? What is your religion? And who is this prophet that was sent to you, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? This is not a Q&A session. It's not a Q&A session like we have in this world. Well, if you remember, if you say, it's not a mental thing when you're in the grave. Depending on how you live, the conditions of truly Allah being your Lord, and the Prophet being your Prophet, and Islam being your way of life, then you'll be able to answer. So don't ever think it's a Q&A session, and it's an easy session that you may be able to answer questions, just as we answer questions in this way. Continuing on from the theme that we've been speaking about, the theme of Aqidah and the meanings of Aqidah, and translating this into true Iman, we focused on, and inshallah in the coming weeks and months, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us, we'll be continuing, as we started already, we'll be continuing to talk about the meaning of La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. The basic understanding of this is, we have no ability or no power except with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For anything that we do. Absolutely anything that we do. You will not be able to look at me in the next second without the will of Allah. I will not be able to speak in the next second or the part of the second without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we do not have the ability inside us. Every moment Allah gives an order for something to be able to happen. So for me to be able to speak, Allah allows me to speak. Allah gives the order for me to be able to speak. It's not something embedded inside me. Why? Because I am absolutely poor and have no power, no ability except with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the meaning that needs to be firmly embedded in our heart. Inshallah, today we're going to talk about another aspect of the meaning of La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. We have no ability and no power except with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What we want to talk about, inshallah, first of all, just to give a small additional clarification of what it means. And then we'll talk about an example, a very common example that a lot of people talk about, and a lot of people, they practice in their everyday life. But if we don't get the perception right, then there could be issues. We need to get the right understanding. When we're worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to get the right understanding. When we apply for a job or we start in a job, We make sure we understand what the company is about. We understand what the mission of the company is. We understand the structure of the company. We understand what my duty is. We understand the limitations of my everyday activity in the job. We understand much about it. Well, you let him know that Allah and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have a greater example. But when I deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I need to know how this relationship should be. I don't take a relationship from culture. I don't take a relationship from anything except the way that Allah wants us to worship. And the way that the revelation came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam demanded that we worship in this way. So first of all, just to give a bit more clarity of the meaning of la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, I want to touch on two aspects inshallah. The first aspect is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the initiator of everything. Is the initiator of everything. Sometimes we give so much limitation to this meaning. And we say, of course we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the initiator of everything. He's the one that subhanahu wa ta'ala created this world. And He's the one that created us. But the issue that we have in our everyday practice and our everyday relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is why do we not put this into practice every single moment? Why do we only talk about the beginning of life, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the initiator at the beginning, and He's the one that created this world? And then we talk about certain spots, certain points in our life or in human life. That Allah created human beings, He created me, He created my parents, my children. But why are we being very specific just around these sorts of areas when we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the initiator? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the initiator of every single moment and part of a moment in our life and everyone else's life. Like I said a few moments ago. You will not be able to take the next step, or your next breath, or your next thought, or your next action without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why the Quran teaches us that even though you will come across many things in life, the fact that it's a repeated pattern, and it happens all the time, just so that you don't think that this has the ability to do it itself all the time continuously, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changes the laws so that we can comprehend when we're reading the Quran, we can comprehend that just because it's continuously working in that way doesn't mean it works on its own. Allah always gives us the command to happen in that way. So we have the story of Sayyidina Ibrahim as we were thrown into the fire. Naturally, a fire should burn. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us that He will overturn the norm or overturn the regular, ongoing order that He gives to the fire to burn. So He makes sure, when He orders subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the fire doesn't burn Sayyidina Ibrahim. That teaches us that it's the order from Allah that makes it burn or not burn. Just the fact that it continuously burns, we know fire burns all the time, doesn't mean that the fire has the ability inside it. Nothing, not even us, has the ability to do anything without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there's an important point here, because I don't want anyone walking out of here thinking that's fine, then I don't control my actions. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gives the power and the ability. First of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you free choice to choose. Because you cannot stand on the day of judgment and be tested for your actions unless you have free will to be asked about your actions. But there are certain actions so you know that you don't have the ability, except if Allah demands, when you come to do certain things in life, you find it doesn't happen that way because Allah demanded it doesn't happen that way. The same concept with Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. So you don't get into the habit of thinking that I have the ability to do this on my own. And this is a mercy from Allah. Because if this meaning in Aqidah needs to be in our heart all the time, in our mind all the time, just think of the beauty of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why one of the companions of making the righteous people, forgive me for not remembering, he says, and listen to these beautiful words so we understand that the meaning, the manifestation of la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. We understand the translation of la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah into a feeling, into a condition, not just a few words. This great pious person, he says that when I want to do something and it happens, I feel happy. Alhamdulillah. I wanted to do something and I did it, alhamdulillah. But when I want to do something and it doesn't happen, I'm even more happier. Because I can feel the unseen hands of Allah in intercepting what I wanted to do. This is how he meant to be. He understood the first time he wouldn't have happened about Allah, so he thanks Allah. And the second time he's even more happier because it's more evident that Allah has intervened with this. And anything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intervenes in a way that we see it very clearly is no doubt dear to our hearts. So the first meaning when we talk about la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the initiator of everything. So what the condition that we should get to is whenever you're moving, you're getting, that's why we have lots of remembrance, lots of dhikr in different times of the day. And a lot of it you'll find that it relates to remembering Allah during times and during things that you will not be able to do without Allah. Obviously, we cannot do anything without Allah. But there are things that really stand out. When you go on a bus or on a transport, Subhanallah, Subhanallah, glory to Allah, who made this form of transportation so I may get on it and go to my journey. So we have lots, when you wake up in the morning and when you go to sleep, you remember Allah because you know that every movement and getting off your bed and into your bed is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this aspect of la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, we have no ability, no power except with Allah. The first aspect is very, very important, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the initiator of everything. Now, let's go through a few verses so that we understand that we are absolutely nothing about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Absolutely nothing. You could be the greatest person in this world and have the greatest knowledge and be the greatest scholar, but we will see from these verses that we are nothing. We will see from these verses, inshallah, that nothing initiated from you, it is all initiated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَاللَّهُ أَخْرَجَكُم مِّن بُطُونِ أُمَّهَاتِكُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا وَجَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you from the wombs of your mother. You did not know anything. So that's the first part. You came out of the wombs of your mothers, may Allah bless them and enter them the highest status of Jannah. You came out of the wombs of your mothers, you did not know anything. And then the rest of the verse. وَجَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ. And He created and provided for you the hearing, and the seeing, and the thinking. So you start with nothing, then the tools that you need to understand and seek knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you. The senses and the mind to comprehend, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you. So the first stage you have nothing, and what you need to comprehend and to understand and seek knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you. And then we go to Surah Al-Baqarah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught Sayyidina Adam the names of everything in this life until the day of judgment. Microphone, studio, masjid, everything that humanity has known in terms of things or in terms of knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught it to Sayyidina Adam. What does that mean? It means that even we will not be able to seek any knowledge except when it's made available to us. And it got made available to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaching it to Sayyidina Adam. So first we started with nothing, then the tools that we needed and the senses and the mind was from Allah. And even if we have these senses of mind but there's no available knowledge, then we'll be nothing. We'll be nothing. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught Sayyidina Adam, and then we were taught through him and through the messengers and companions. And then what happened? After Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the knowledge available, you will not get any single piece of knowledge except when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows you. وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِشَيْءٍ مِنْ عِلْمِهِ إِلَّا بِمَا شَاءَ. So even though the knowledge and the information is available, you will not be able to get it until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives permission for you to seek this knowledge. But don't become arrogant when you have knowledge and information. Why? Because Allah reminds you that after you had nothing and then he made the senses and then made available the knowledge and the information and then gave you the permission to seek this knowledge and maybe you became a great scholar or something, never forget that there's a greater person, there's a greater than you. Stop for a long person. Never forget that there is a greater than you. وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. And above every knowledge is the ultimate knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And some narrations say that this is related to human beings as well. So you may get to a certain level where there's always going to be someone on top of you in terms of knowledge, and someone on top of them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the all-knowing. So we see from the verses, the sequence of verses, that you started with nothing. And even the stages where you had to develop and had to happen so that you reach the level that we're at today, nothing could have happened without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these two elements are very, very important. The first one, when we said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the initiator of everything, and the second aspect of La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, that we absolutely have nothing, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gave everything to us. The second aspect, so that was the first aspect. The second aspect is that the qadr will only come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you may demand, you may want to do something, but you will not be able to do it without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because, like we said, Allah is the initiator of everything. And secondly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the controller of everything. Allah knows how to govern this world. And He knows what actions everyone should be able to do and what everyone should not be able to do. And like we say, we're not saying that Allah controls every action that you do because you'll be asked about your actions. But there are things that you might want to do, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want it to happen. Because He has ultimate control. If you had the free will and ability to do everything, and you were able to do everything that you wanted, then alhamdulillah, that God would not be in the right characteristics of a God. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intercepts things so that we always remember that there's a much higher force and power above us. And let's give one example. You have many scholars outside being Muslim scholars or Western scholars of medicine, for example. Medicine. But why do you think that Allah may not have allowed them to reach the conclusion of how to cure things like AIDS, for example? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, He gives the order, it can happen in any moment. We believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may disallow the scholars reach the levels of knowing how to cure certain things and certain diseases, because if they were able to cure every single disease, then they will glorify themselves. But because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful and wants to remind these people every single moment or parts of their life to always remember that there's someone above them in power and in knowledge, and you need to revert back to Him, and you need to worship Him. So He gives them an opportunity by them not being able to reach the cure of certain diseases. So they can sit down and think, where's the solution? But when they ask where's the solution, they should ask where's the ultimate unlimited power? Because all the powers of scholars that come today and in the past have not been able to cure these diseases. So there's an aqidah aspect to that as well. Where if they sit down and contemplate for a moment and think to themselves that we've reached the maximum level and we're not able to go beyond, then there must be a greater power who allows us to cure certain diseases that we weren't able to cure before. Because there are many diseases in the past. They were at the same situation as AIDS today. We're not able to cure it. We've reached a level we don't have to do anymore. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed them later on and for science to develop and then to be able to cure these diseases. So this is another form of mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we know that the qadr is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this in itself is a blessing and a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, one misconception that a lot of people have is that we think that we are worshipping Allah by doing good deeds, and by doing good deeds we're going to enter Jannah. This is a misconception. And this is a misconception from the Aqeedah perspective. If we truly understood that hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, we would not be saying that I would do good deeds in order to enter paradise. We have a hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the meaning of the hadith, he says that you will not enter paradise. It is not your deeds that will enter paradise. So the companions asked the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, either you, O Prophet of Allah? He said, yes, even me. Except that Allah brings upon me His mercy. Now, when we understand that that nothing will happen except with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we go back to the concept of the power and ability comes from Allah, not from our deeds. It doesn't come from our deeds. Why? Because what you're essentially saying is that by the time I die, the number of deeds that I've done, the number of good things I've done, I've accumulated, for example, 700,245 hasanat, and I should be guaranteed to enter paradise. Who says that you can guarantee anything over Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You are nothing. We said the verses, you had nothing. Anything that you are able to do out of good deeds, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you the life and gave you the senses, and gave you the knowledge and made it available and allowed you to have this knowledge and gave you the power and gave you the power and ability to stand up and do it. So how do you then go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, Ya Allah, I've accumulated this much amount of good deeds, I have to enter paradise. You have nothing. Don't you dare say to Allah that I have to. You have no guarantees according to this hadith except the mercy of Allah. Now, we need to clarify one thing so no one says, but hang on, I've read many verses from the Quran and many hadiths that tell me to do good deeds and I enter paradise. Yes, that's encouraged. That's a reflection of your belief. I can't say that I love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and I don't even help my neighbor, being a Muslim or non-Muslim. Or I don't do this or I don't do that. You have to get up and do something. But is it this doing that you're doing what's going to enter paradise? No, it's the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why, brothers, the meaning that we get out of this is stop thinking that you're doing so many good deeds because that's not what's going to enter you paradise. If you went to your manager at work every half an hour and knocked on the door and said, I served 5 customers, and then come back after half an hour and say, I did some administration work, and then come back after half an hour and tell him I cleaned my desk, what's he going to say to you? What's he going to say to you? But the idea with our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the mercy. We're doing these deeds not as a guarantee, but we're doing it so that we can take the opportunity in every moment of our life to demonstrate to Allah that we seek His pleasure and His mercy. We don't go to our mothers and tell her, let's sit down, we need to talk about what I've done over the week. It doesn't work like that. But when your mother sees that you're showing mercy, or you're seeking her mercy and her dua, naturally, then the relationship becomes a great and normal relationship between your mother and yourself. And it's the same with Allah. It's the same with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You cannot be ticking boxes and saying I'm doing these deeds and think that you can come to the day of judgment. Why? Because these deeds that you're doing, they can end up being an idol that you're worshipping without you realizing. Why? Because they're idols that are leading you to Allah to enter paradise. Isn't this what Quraysh is doing? They have idols and they say that these idols are to bring you close to Allah. We're sometimes doing the same thing. I'm doing these deeds so that these deeds can enter me paradise. No, it's not these deeds, it's Allah. So yes, do good deeds, but revert straight to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and seek His mercy. And when you do a deed, remember who you're doing it for. Don't remember the deed that you did, but remember who you're doing it for. Because when you think about the deeds that you're doing, you're going to think, MashaAllah, I did a big thing. But when you're thinking about who you're doing it for, you will realize that I will never be able to do anything that's enough for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Shall I give you one example? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that one day with Allah, one day in Allah's time or the calculation of Allah, a day, one day is 50,000 years of our life. So let's calculate. Let's say someone lives for 100 years. 100 years. and he slept a third of the night. 8 hours a day, that's what we sleep, right? I hope not. So, he sleeps a third of his life. He's got 2/3 left. He's worshipping and doing good deeds, etc. Let's say for 10 hours a day. Now calculate 10 hours a day over 66 years. And just calculate that and do the division over 50,000 years. So we may think that I've worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 66 years, or let's take away the first 10 years of your baby in your childhood life. You're saying that you worship Allah for 56 years, but now calculate all those 56 years in our life mean to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when the one day with Allah is the equivalent of 50,000 years in our life. Nothing. Nothing. Wallahi, if you even live 50,000 years, if you live 50,000 years, let's imagine, we only live 50,000 years, and we worship Allah for 10 hours a day. How many days is that going to come out? Or how many weeks or how many months? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of this whole world, has given us everything, and you imagine you live for 50,000 years, and you come on the day of judgment and you're very happy, and you say, I worshipped you for 5 years, over 50,000 years I lived. What's 5 years? What's 5 years? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just put your eyesight on the scale, and put all your deeds on another scale, your scale will never win. Not even your eyesight. Take one hair out of your eyelashes, just one hair. These hairs on your eyelashes that protect the dust from going into your eye. Take one eyelash, just one piece of hair, put it on the scale. And put all your good deeds on another scale. Your eyelash will not win. It will go nowhere near winning. This is our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't create an idol thinking that we can reach Allah and enter paradise with this idol called I am doing good deeds. You will never be able to do good deeds. Never look at the deeds you're doing, but look at who you're doing it for. Then you will know that you need to live every single moment of your life, doing for the sake of Allah. And you will sit down before you go to sleep every day, and you will do so much istighfar and tawbah that you have not given Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enough worship that He deserves, even though you've been up and down all day worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and every moment of the day you've been saying Allah Muhammad throughout the day, and this you will still be doing istighfar and tawbah at the end of the day, knowing that you've done nothing. Not because you haven't done any deeds, but you've done nothing compared to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be worshipped. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم أدعو الله ولكم مؤمنون بالله. الحمد لله رب العالمين واشهد ان لا اله الا الله واشهد ان سيدنا ونبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد خاتم النبيين والهادي الى صراط الله المستقيم. So brothers, the conclusion that we come out with today is the relationship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to be one of quality, not of quantity. One that we're really thinking about Allah and really trying to build that closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And really trying to deepen that relationship. And not just depending on anything except the heart being connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And just so that we can conclude, inshallah, we spoke about this before, but we read Surah Al-Fatiha every day. And we pray with it every day, and your prayer will not be accepted except if you pray with the Surah Al-Fatiha. And there's one verse, brothers and sisters, at the beginning of Surah Al-Fatiha. It teaches us the meaning that we've been talking about since the beginning of the Quran. It teaches us that we should be worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for anything except that He is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahi, we do this with our mothers and fathers. Does anyone go to their mother today and kiss her hand and feet because he's thinking, once upon a time she put some food on the table? It doesn't work like that. We are kissing her hands and feet because she is our mother. Full stop. We don't think of anything else. Do we kiss the hands and the feet of our wives? Yes, I say the hands and feet of our wives. There's nothing wrong with it. Because she is our wife, or because she did the washing yesterday. So why do we do it with our everyday life and with our parents and our wives and husbands? But we don't do it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why is it that when we speak to Allah, or we want to raise our hand and speak to Allah, we have to request something? Why can't we just